Have you lost your fucking mind? You were talking about drug shit on the belly.
Did you know that Eric Stoltz was originally cast as Marty McFly in Back to the Future and filmed nearly 5 weeks of the movie before being replaced by Michael J. Fox? It's one of the most infamous casting switch-ups in Hollywood history. But what happened after that? For a while it looked like Eric Stoltz was destined to become one of the biggest names of his generation, after powerful roles in Mask, Some Kind of Wonderful and a string of edgy indies. Then he just seemed to fade. But Stoltz didn't disappear completely. From leading man to character actor and eventually to a successful director and producer, Stoltz built a career far from the tabloid spotlight, but just as fascinating. Today we're going to look back at the rise, recast, reinvention and quiet resilience of Eric Stoltz. Let's fade to black. Eric Stoltz was born on September 30th, 1961 in Whittier, California. He grew up in Santa Barbara, where his mother was a violinist and his father was a schoolteacher. Raised in a household that valued creativity and the arts, Stoltz developed an early interest in music and performance. He played piano and violin and was even involved in theatre productions from a young age. He attended the University of Southern California for a time, but dropped out to pursue acting full-time. Like many young hopefuls, he took on small roles, stage work, minor appearances, the usual actor's grind. His first film role came in Fast Times at Ridgemont High in 1982, where he played one of Jess Bicoli's stoner buddies alongside Sean Penn. But it wasn't until Mask in 1985 that he truly broke through. Playing Rocky Dennis, a teenager with a facial deformity, Stoltz gave a performance that was both physically transformative and emotionally devastating. It earned him a Golden Globe nomination and proved he had serious dramatic chops, even under heavy prosthetics. That role marked him as one of the most promising actors of his generation. The industry took notice, and bigger roles followed. And one of them was about to be huge. After the success of Mask, Eric Stoltz landed what should have been the role of a lifetime, Marty McFly in Back to the Future. He beat out dozens of young actors, including C. Thomas Howell and John Cusack, and was chosen by director Robert Zemeckis and producer Bob Gale based on his dramatic chops and recent acclaim. But almost immediately there was a problem. Stoltz brought intensity to the part. Too much intensity, it turned out. He saw Back to the Future as a serious time travel drama rather than a light, fast-paced comedy. His tone was darker and more brooding. His chemistry with the rest of the cast, especially Christopher Lloyd, was stiff, and while he was undoubtedly talented, the role simply didn't fit. Behind the scenes, tensions grew. The crew reportedly referred to him as Marty off-camera because Stoltz insisted on staying in character. Some found it admirable, others found it frustrating. After nearly 5 weeks of filming, with huge chunks of the movie already shot, Zemeckis and Gale made a drastic decision. They fired Stoltz and recast the role with their original first choice, Michael J. Fox, who had been unavailable at the start of production due to his commitment to family ties. It was a massive gamble. The reshoots were expensive, but it paid off. Fox nailed the tone, the movie became a phenomenon, and Stoltz, despite working hard and never speaking bitterly about the experience, was erased from one of the most iconic roles in film history. To this day, only a few snippets of his footage have been publicly released, usually as part of anniversary documentaries or featurettes. For most actors, getting fired from a soon-to-be blockbuster might have wrecked their momentum. For Stoltz, it did knock the wind out of his mainstream ascent. He never quite reclaimed that A-list trajectory, but in true Eric Stoltz fashion, he didn't try to. Instead of chasing redemption in the studio system, he switched things up. He began building a career on the fringes, picking roles that interested him regardless of box office, and in doing so he became one of the most consistently interesting actors of his generation. After the Back to the Future debacle, many expected Stoltz to lie low, maybe even disappear. Instead, he came back stronger, landing the lead in Some Kind of Wonderful in 1987, a John Hughes-produced teen drama directed by Howard Deutsch. It was, in many ways, the anti-Pretty in Pink. Stoltz played Keith, a working-class outsider torn between his crush on the popular girl and his loyal tomboy best friend, played by Mary Stuart Masterson. The film struck a chord with audiences who felt underserved by the usual high school stereotypes. Keith wasn't slick or sarcastic. He was awkward, introspective, and emotionally vulnerable. In other words, he was pure Stoltz and a very real human being in this movie. The role solidified his reputation as the thinking person's teen heartthrob, a kind of anti-McFly in the best way possible. And even though Some Kind of Wonderful didn't match the cultural firestorm of Hughes' earlier films, it gained a devoted following that has only grown over time. From there, Stoltz made a conscious pivot toward independent film, long before it was fashionable to do so. In the late 80s and 90s, he appeared in a steady stream of quiet, cerebral projects. The Fly 2 in 1989, a darker, more tragic sequel to Cronenberg's classic. Say Anything in 1989, where he played a philosophical stoner opposite John Cusack. Killing Zoe in 1993, a violent existential crime thriller written by Quentin Tarantino collaborator Roger Avery. Sleep With Me in 1994, where he famously delivered a deadpan monologue about Top Gun being a veiled metaphor for repressed male desire. By this point, Stoltz wasn't really chasing a stardom, he was curating a career. His roles were often understated, intellectual, or off-kilter. He had no problem taking supporting parts if the material was interesting, and while this kept him out of the blockbuster spotlight, it earned him respect among directors, indie fans, and fellow actors. He becomes something rare in Hollywood, an actor with integrity and mystery, someone who showed up only when he had something to say and then disappeared just as quickly. By the early 90s, Eric Stoltz had firmly positioned himself in the margins, a reliable face in low-budget dramas, character-heavy indies, and festival darlings. But in 1994, he popped up in a film that would help redefine American cinema. In Quentin Tarantino's Pulp Fiction, Stoltz played Lance, the grungy, barefoot drug dealer who sells heroin to John Travolta's Vincent Vega and later helps revive Mia Wallace with an adrenaline shot to the heart. It's a small part, but Stoltz makes it unforgettable. His shaggy hair, stoned confusion, and domestic bickering with his girlfriend Jodie, played by Rosanna Arquette, added a layer of absurd comedy to one of the film's most tense scenes. That role marked a kind of cultural re-entry for Stoltz, not as a leading man, but as a quirky, scene-stealing presence. He was no longer the star of the show, but when he showed up, you definitely noticed. Around the same time, Stoltz delivered one of his most acclaimed dramatic performances in The Water Dance in '92, co-starring with Wesley Snipes and Helen Hunt. The film, based on co-writer Neil Jimenez's real-life experience, follows a young writer adjusting to life in a rehab center after a paralyzing accident. Stoltz's performance as a newly paraplegic man struggling with his identity and relationships is raw, honest, and painfully understated. It earned him an Independent Spirit Award nomination and reminded critics just how good he could be when given material with weight. Throughout the rest of the 90s, Stoltz racked up more roles that deepened his reputation as a cult favourite. And then there was Memphis Belle, a criminally underrated war film from 1990. Stoltz played Danny Daly, the bomber's quiet, soft-spoken radio operator. It's a role that really showcased his ability to underplay emotion. Even when surrounded by a loud, ensemble cast, he brought the humanity. As the 2000s rolled in, Eric Stoltz made a subtle but significant shift. He began stepping behind the camera. It wasn't a sudden departure from acting, he still appeared in films and TV roles, but his focus had clearly evolved. Rather than chasing the next big part, he started shaping stories from the director's chair. His first major directorial effort was My Horrible Year in 2001, a made-for-TV movie for Showtime. The film about a teenager coping with the messiness of adolescence and a crumbling family showcased his interest in human drama and emotional nuance. But it was in television that Stoltz found his true footing as a director. Over the next 2 decades, he became a prolific force behind the scenes, directing episodes of major shows like Boston Legal, Grey's Anatomy, Glee, Madam Secretary, Nashville, Caprica, a Battlestar Galactica prequel where he also had a recurring acting role. His style was restrained but precise, favouring character development and pacing over flashy technique. As a director, Stoltz earned a reputation for being actor-friendly, technically sound, and emotionally intelligent. In 2014, he became a producing director on the CBS political drama Madam Secretary, overseeing more than 30 episodes across the show's run. It was one of his most sustained professional commitments, and one that largely took him out of the public spotlight. While most people might not have even realised he was involved, Stoltz was helping shape a primetime network series from the ground up. The shift from actor to director wasn't just about control or creative curiosity, it reflected a broader truth about Eric Stoltz. His retreat from fame wasn't really retreat at all, it was a deliberate pivot and one that allowed him to work more freely. Today, Eric Stoltz lives a life that's almost the opposite of the typical former teen heartthrob story. He's quietly thriving behind the scenes of the entertainment industry, still working, still respected, and still doing things his way. Stoltz has largely stayed out of the public eye since stepping back from acting as a full-time pursuit, but he hasn't disappeared from Hollywood. Far from it. His reputation behind the camera has only grown, particularly as someone who can bring strong, character-driven storytelling to mainstream television without sacrificing subtlety. As of the last few years, Stoltz is believed to be living in the Pacific Northwest, embracing a quieter, more private lifestyle. He's married to singer Bernadette Moley, and the couple have a daughter together. Unlike many of his peers, he's kept his family out of the spotlight entirely, a conscious decision that aligns perfectly with his overall approach to fame. He's also been known to teach and mentor young actors and filmmakers, occasionally guest lecturing or appearing at low-key industry events, but never in a self-promoting way. Stoltz has never had social media, rarely gives interviews, and seems genuinely uninterested in relitigating the past or basking in nostalgia. Eric Stoltz's story isn't the flashiest, but it's probably one of the rarest. He quietly stepped behind the camera and built a career on substance over spectacle. His move into directing and producing has proven far more interesting and likely far more lasting than a string of forgettable blockbusters ever could have been. Thanks for watching. New videos land every Tuesday and Saturday, and as ever, I look forward to seeing you all in the next one.